Hello, everyone. Thanks for dedicating part of your day to be with us for the Autistic Perspective series. We appreciate you making space to be a part of this submission. I am Azrael. My pronouns are ze, them, and they, them. I am the Advocacy and Communications Coordinator for the Chronically Ill Autistic Neuroeclectic Disabled Organization for Reclamation, otherwise known as CANDOR, and I will be facilitating this discussion. Today, we are exploring into autistic social life. Panelists will share their experiences with social life under the current neuronormative expectations and their experiences existing and fostering community outside of these societal norms. This is a really phenomenal group of panelists. We are lucky to have them all together today, and I'm going to learn so much. As always, we want to name that the full spectrum of autism is not present across this panel. No panel could represent all of the unique ways humans exist, and we do want to specifically acknowledge that non-speaking perspectives are missing today. We are in the process of raising more funds to increase accessibility to these panels, including live closed captioning, ASL interpretation, and live Spanish translation. Donations also go towards compensation of our panelists. You can always contribute towards this on our website, and the link is going into the chat now as well. We have developed 6 questions for the discussion today. Panelists have had the questions for a few weeks to prepare. When we are finished with questions, panelists will take questions from the audience. During this time, you can submit your questions in the chat, or you can use the feature in Zoom to raise your hand. Throughout the conversation, we will welcome any pauses that may occur and encourage an active chat room, but please remain on mute and off camera if you are not a panelist until the Q&A section. At times, panelists may elect not to participate by turning their screen off, and we will give that space. Please give that space and compassion to yourselves as well. You may leave at any time as this session is being recorded. I'm going to start with the questions for the panelists. Societal standards often give a singular view of what social life can be. How does your ideal social life differ from societal standards? And you can unmute whenever the answer comes to you.
So for me, I would say that I find joy and I do not have to physically hang with a person or spend time with a person in order to feel like I am nurturing that friendship. I don't have to have a conversation actively with that person every day. I like things like using Discord and just watching something together or discussing a TV show that we saw just through text. Like I count any time spent bonding with that person as social interaction. It doesn't have to be like going out to a party or going shopping together because that's not the most accessible option for people. And so I really do see importance in, you know, a lot of people think like post-pandemic or post lockdown, there's not as much need for online interaction. But no, I think that that's just as important for accessibility. So for me, I uphold my online friendships just as much as I would my in person.
This is Heather. Am I being heard? Yes, okay. Uh, um, so I was diagnosed in 2012 when I was 41. And I had been, doing these neuronormative events with great frustration and discomfort for most of my life. anyone who knows me knows that I have extreme noise defensiveness. I also spend the majority of my time kind of trapped at home because I don't have transportation. So when I do something social, I would actually like to go somewhere, and be with people. The problem is that, um, all the things that come with that, all the noise, um, potentially drinking, because it seems like most events incorporate drinking. I don't like to be around alcohol at all. Uh, Smoking, um, and most of my interests are not the interests of other people. So, going to a gathering and then it's like, oh, there is absolutely nothing here that interests me, whether it be sports or, whatever. Um, I really prefer low key things that a lot of, my neurotypical, friends just kind of find immature, and then you feel ridiculous for saying, hey, let's do this thing. And it's just kind of like, okay. Um, and so I just, generally reach a point where I just don't even try to do these social activities because, they're either overwhelming or extremely uninteresting. And talk about doing stuff online. I guess because of my age, it's still not my style of interaction.
Yeah, I resonate with things that both of you have said, and particularly around sound sensitivity in places. There are certain loud sounds that I really enjoy being around, when I know that they're gonna happen. But there's other, like a concert or actually a sporting event. But but other things when it's unexpected, or yeah, like it's just not familiar. It might, it's not that those are things that are more jarring. But I would say in general for me, where I feel like I really kind of differ or like always found myself like wanting something that maybe like the rest of the group that I was with wasn't really needing, was like I really like when I come together around a specific activity versus having something that's really open-ended. Like I know a lot of my friends just want to like gather in an open space for an undetermined amount of time and with no specific plan. And then I just really don't know what to do with that. It feels like I do like feel anxious about having to go to those kinds of things because there's like no context for what conversation might be. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my body while I'm there. Um, so like I really love it when there's like I know what's happening in advance so that like it helps me figure out conversation, what the interactions might look like, and it gives it I would have more inclination to be able to initiate in those situations because there's like something like that it's based around, and I might even be able to do research on it in advance if it's unfamiliar, or like watch how, like if it's a game or something, I might be able to watch how it's played in advance. So I really like kind of knowing those things. And then I don't know why this one came up for this question for me, but I'm gonna name it. I think is the social norms about how you greet and say goodbye, really are different for me. And it's always super awkward. I feel like most of the people I know, I don't know if it's reflective of the general population, but it seems like most of the people I know are like huggers and or like they want to have some sort of physical contact happen at the beginning of seeing each other, at the end of seeing each other. And so I just like, I'm like awkwardly standing far away until we've said enough things that we've gotten like past, or I'll try to like leave without saying goodbye to just completely avoid the moment altogether. Yeah, those things stand out to me.
Thank you all for sharing that. We kind of touched on a bit of the next question, so we can continue like talking about both things. What barriers keep you from that ideal social life? These can be accessibility issues, sensory difficulties, communication barriers, societal expectations, etc.
I can take that one.
Yeah.
Um, uh, like you said, it's just kind of elaborating on the previous question, about the world just not being geared for, sensory sensitive people. Some personal things that I usually run into are just transportation, being able to actually get to the event, hoping a bus takes you to the event, not a quarter mile away from the event. Having the money to do stuff. I'm only able to work 3 days a week. I can't just be like, oh yeah, I have $40 to go do this thing. And then finding that so many things that happen around Durham that I would be interested in are held in bars for some reason. Oh, we're going to do a craft night, but it's at a bar. We're doing puzzles and games at a bar. And those are not safe places for me at all. Obviously because of the noise, but just being around people who are drinking and not behaving in ways that I can anticipate. Yeah, my sobriety is extremely important to me, and it's just very difficult to find spaces where that is not part of the gathering, because that's what draws people there in the first place, not the thing going on.
Yeah, for me, similar to what Heather said, my issue is due to me having seizures and being prone to fainting, I cannot drive.
Oh,
So I, I would love to be able to look into that, but that's another thing. Not being able to drive kind of limits your options as far as work goes. And then, as Heather mentioned, I'm in Durham currently, recently moved, but so many things require, for me, that would be taking a Uber, which if you don't work takes a lot of money. And then again with the bus, I personally have trouble navigating like directions. So I could get somewhere, and this is the ADHD and autism thing, and end up, a 10-minute trip then takes 40 minutes because I have gotten, turned around multiple times. And those things are just not. And again, another thing for me is the not being able to anticipate certain interactions, with people arguing, or even if they're not arguing, just tension in a room, and I pick up on those things. I'm extremely sensitive to it, and I can't diffuse the situation. So those things, even when we speak about like online, a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this sometimes. There's a expectation to have instantaneous conversation, and that's just not possible for everybody, or possible at times. You need asynchronous, you need time to like almost like mail a letter and let that marinate for a person for them to reply. Like, but there's an expectation for you to get back to a person within 10 minutes, or you see this person is online and there's no other, explanation for that. So those type of things, like there's a structure of like what I want versus what is it feels like it's expected of me, and the environments that those things happen in. Like, can you plan around sensory overwhelm? So for me, a part of my seizures is actually caused by sensory overwhelm. So if I was to get, emotionally, over a barrier, threshold, it's like, is that atmosphere prepared for that? Like, I don't have time to, inform each person directly of those things. So it's like a lot of like planning meticulously to just go somewhere for an hour.
What I would add to those comments are yeah, like the around anticipation as well. Like if I don't have some of the information about the event, particularly like a new place or a new activity, if I don't have certain information in advance, then that's probably going to deter me from going. And usually I will try to like, normally it's not provided. It's like all the things that I'm curious about something is not on the event flyer. So usually I try to ask my partner or people that I know if they've ever been to something like that to try to get more information. But like those kinds of, that is a deterrent. Honestly, like previous social, like I only have so many social spoons in a day. And so sometimes I've spent all those at work or with my kids or something like that. So by the time there's a social opportunity, uh, even though given, you know, all the right conditions, I would want to be there. In that moment, I just am toast and I can't go. So that is sometimes that happens. I also say anticipated social pressure. I was like, maybe there's something that I wouldn't mind being around or observing, or just sort of being a part of peripherally. But in my experience, when I go there, there's pressure to then also be a participant. And even if I might have had the slightest inclination to try to do the thing, if one person makes a comment about how I'm not participating or even tries to nudge me to participate, that immediately is going to make it not happen. So I just need like the space to join on my own, but also other people feel like they're being encouraging and supportive, but they're actually contributing to shutdown and avoidance. And so sometimes I'll just not go to the place at all because I just don't want to create that for anyone. And it just feels then like I'm a social burden that everyone has to try to help make join in the way that's neuronormative. And I'm like, I'm enjoying karaoke over here in the corner. Like, y'all keep doing your thing, but please do not bring that mic over here. Yeah.
I relate to a lot of what everybody has said, and I think that I have like a slightly different point of view, so I'm gonna share for like both of those questions. Um, I realized that as I spend more and more time in neurodivergent spaces with people who have like similar experiences to me, that I am extremely extroverted. I always thought that I was very introverted due to like the societal norms and pressures that I was having to force myself to like box into. But I've started to like step out of that and realize like, oh, I love to see people. I recharge when I get to see people most of the time now, or like talk to the people that I know. And being in Durham, I tend to see like people that I've seen before at different events and like get extremely excited to see them. I also, differently than T, am a hugger, but I'm a very specific type of hugger. I prefer deep pressure. So if somebody's a good hugger, for me, it's like they're crushing my soul back into my body. with that like hug. And typically also the people that I interact with ask before hugs happen. So there's like that bit of joy of somebody acknowledging that like my body is mine and I'm choosing to share that with them. Um, so now that I've said all of that, I'd like to move into the next question, which have to do with support needs. Because I think that we've all talked about like difficulties and struggles in spaces and finding needs and getting those needs met is better. So when you think about your support needs in social settings, what is it like expressing and getting those needs actually met?
So I personally have experienced this, and like I was involved in theater, and if anybody's ever done theater, it is a very high energy place, with people who know each other already and have established relationships, especially because again, they can be transported, they've been in the area generally. So for me, in order to articulate what I need, I really do have to like sit and write things out. And it's you never know if the person, the director, or anybody who you're working with is even willing to hear you out on that. Or if they're going to meet you with, okay, well, toughen up. Like, we all have to do things we don't want to do because you're coming to them asking for these reasonable accommodations. Like for me, something I need is sometimes just to walk away from the conversation. And I've tried to articulate to people like, hey, it's not that I'm not listening, it's just I need space or this is going to overwhelm me. So I'm going to take a break outside, or I need to wear my headphones and I'm trying to explain, like, I'm not listening to anything. This is just to like dampen the noise. I can still hear you. I just need this bit of sensory. Or maybe I want to keep my jacket on or my blanket because I just like the texture of it. And I'm just trying to communicate that like I'm not trying to ask for mountains to be moved. I'm just asking for, you know, that consideration because everybody, autistic, ADHD or not, has things that they just prefer. They have clothes that they like wearing or jewelry they like to have on them or a toy that they enjoyed from their childhood. Like it's not that outside of the realm of reality to allow people to be comfortable, especially when it's not inconveniencing anybody else. And if anything, it's helping that person function better in that space.
So my first thought, literally my first thought when I read this question was, it's pointless asking for accommodations, um, because uh, I have yet to encounter another person who has this extreme noise avoidance, and when you try to explain it to people, um, they just there's just no way for them to compare their experience to mine and go like, oh, okay, I get it. It just doesn't happen. The first uh, or the best example I can give is that we had a work party last year, and the person who put it together has it is autistic, has autistic child. And so you would think, okay, she totally understands this, this challenge for me. And I get there and it's great. And then the DJ comes out and the entire event space just turns into this like vibrating, all encompassing sound. And of course, I brought my headphones because I can't leave the house without them. And even with them on, I was still so uncomfortable, like to a cellular level, trying to to just exist in that space. And immediately people stopped talking to me. Because, you know, they look and they see the headphones and they're like, oh, well, she's, you know, she wants to be on her own, or, you know, whatever it is. It's like, no, this is what I have to do to not be on the ground crying right now. And in an attempt to be inclusive, the coordinator had, you know, there's this room behind the bar that was set up, you know, had a couch and lowered lights and all this, but the walls were about as thick as a piece of paper. And so it wasn't like, oh, you can go into this safe space. No, I can't. It's still not safe. It's literally the same level of noise. And eventually I just quietly left. Because I felt alienated, you know, no longer included. And that part of me was just broken, because these were people that I wanted to spend time with. And this was a big deal, this party. But I eventually just quietly slipped away because I was so overwhelmed. I knew I was gonna end up in complete meltdown. And so any place that I go, I just assume this is going to be problematic. And I'd say the majority of the time I just end up not doing it, because I'm so afraid I'm going to be uncomfortable, seriously uncomfortable.
Thank you for sharing that vulnerability with us.
I think that similarly, I usually opt not to say and just try to like manage or adjust or avoid on my own. I think I have to feel a certain amount of trust with the person or the place, or have had, you know, a pattern of positive interactions and like in a place to feel like I could say something. I think it still feels like yeah, like not worth it often. But there have been times when I've said something and it's been received and others have made some adjustments or things. And when that happens, you know, it is really relieving to have that experience, to have felt heard, and to have felt like now I can participate, I can be a part, because these other things were able to change. And it did take other people to make that happen. I think something that I've also done that has helped me get better at that is creating scripts. So like I know what kinds of things are hard. So if I already create some language in advance, then I find that I'm more easily able to say something because I've already planned my words. It's not like another barrier in getting my needs met because I already thought about what I would say. Yeah.
With all of what we talked about in mind, do you change how you interact with others based on your past experiences? If you've started to kind of touch on that with the accessibility needs question.
I think I can actually start this time. Not my usual. Yeah, I feel like one of my strengths is pattern recognition. So when I feel like I feel like I very much am always bringing forward everything that's happened in the past with each individual person or each individual place, and using that to inform what I will say or do in that space. How much or little I may mask in that space, how much I might like advocate or not for myself in that space. And I do feel like it is also really contingent upon who else is in the space. Like you were referencing earlier, like when you're in a mostly neurodivergent or neuroexpansive space, the way that you can be, the way that you can communicate, the way that you can act is different. And there's a level of understanding of there being so much more variance in how people are communicating and acting, that there's just like more room. And so there's like more like space to stim or unmask or just, you know, be there without engagement in a certain way. So I definitely am like always assessing those kinds of things, the environment and the people and the context, to determine what I'm gonna do. Yeah.
So for me, let me go back to the question actually. So yes, I kind of what he said, I am very observant. And so I try to gauge, my past experiences with a person or past experiences with a situation in order to curate the conversation that I'm having, or, just keep the, whether it be that it's a professional setting and I need to articulate something for the sake of getting a goal met, or it being a social situation where I'm just trying to keep the energy light or be supportive. I don't gauge things situation by situation. It really is built off of what I've experienced in the past, for better or for worse, because that consistency is also important to me and that routine is important to me. So I really like to feel that there's a common motion going with my communication and engagement with people and places, really.
So this question for me took me all the way back to just after my diagnosis, when I was trying to find other people like me. Um, and it being 2012, there weren't all these great, groups online really. And again, I like to meet people in person because I can get a better feel for them. So, I ended up on a meetup group, that probably said something like high functioning, autistic adults. And, went to several of these gatherings, decent sized group, maybe 20 or so people. The majority of them were white guys in their 20s who had been dragged out of their homes by their mothers to, you know, please go interact with people. And then there were a handful of us who were older and were late diagnosed, and we just didn't feel like we fit in. So it's like, well, why don't we do our own group? Okay, somebody um, allowed us to use their office space, and we would meet there. Um, it was okay, uh, but the group kind of quickly outgrew this just sitting around in a circle talking thing, and they wanted to go do things. Okay, well, that would be great. The first thing they choose is karaoke in a bar. And I obviously decline, I can't do that. I'm sorry. So the next thing they choose is trivia night at an Irish pub. For which I was like, okay, let's just suck it up and try to do this, because I was starting to feel really excluded. And you know, took my earplugs and went, and it was so awful. Not only was the noise overwhelming, and I just had regular basic earplugs back then, but the people I was with, were getting intoxicated and were no longer the people that, I felt comfortable with, and actually had someone making very uncomfortable passes at me, that led to me just abruptly leaving. And so I felt an extreme sense of betrayal, that, I had worked so hard to find my people. I found them. And once again, I was excluded because they were not willing to accommodate my specific sensory issue, because none of them had that at all. So it was just like, oh, well, we're going to do this. And if you can't go, oh, well. Okay. And that is just basically set the bar for how I deal with people in social situations, or people talking, inviting me places, things like that, that I just, my first thought is, how badly is this going to impact me? Not like, oh, how much fun is this going to be? But okay, how hard is this going to overwhelm me, that now I'm going to need an entire day of recovery from? Is it worth it? And most of the time I just say no. It's too much trouble, and it ultimately leads me to think less of those people that I thought would be safe for me.
I personally want to think, take a moment to sit in that discomfort myself, because I know that I probably have been as thoughtless as those people have been to some people in my life. I think it's good to reflect on thinking of different ways to make people feel actually included, instead of expecting, even through my own issues, that everybody's going to be on board with the same type of interaction or fun outing that I will be. I'd like to thank everybody for your answers to that question. Definitely gave me a lot to think about in the future. I really, really appreciate it. But I'm going to move on to the next question, because I don't want us to go too far tonight. Norms for socializing can vary in niche interest groups like countercultural movements. Have you found certain settings, events, or subcultures more accommodating?
So I would say for me, the best experiences that I've had are very niche in places where it is very focused on the hyperfixation that I may have. So whether that be that I like tutor history specifically, and I am in a history class, and that is what the group is focusing on, or the person happens to have an interest in, that is the easiest place for me. It's places where I'm with artists who are not traditionally trained, or people who may not have the same background as, you know, the people who went to college for this thing, but they're still as passionate as me. So, just having that relatability with the person, or the common ground when I go to that place. Maybe it's a person who it's their first time trying an event or activity like that, and it's my first time trying that activity. It's usually finding the new person also who is, and me especially like trying to work with my anxiety about socializing, especially, and kind of just find the groove of the situation because it really is worth it for me at the end. But it does take a lot of work to get up to, and it's still, hard for me to do. But yeah, those situations where, kind of like T was saying, with it's not open, it's not just open-ended. It's not just a mixer that I'm going to where it's just socialize about what you want and share what you like, and then I go off on a 30-minute tangent about trained monkeys at a circus, and then it's just the mess. Like, like it's something that's like giving me almost like a prompt to work with, and I'm able to then explore within that. And there may be people who like that, and there may be people that don't. But I'm there to just find who my people are.
So I think I frequently come off pretty jaded, which I think is based on just 5 decades of experience in struggling with my limitations. Um, I would like to think that the weirdos like me are more inclusive, but it's literally only in neurodivergent specific spaces that I actually feel safe. Um, I find, and this is just my perspective, that a lot of those subcultures don't actually understand that intersectionality needs to include disabled people and people with invisible disabilities. Um, that that is, for whatever reason, too much trouble or just not part of their experience. So it doesn't get taken into consideration. It becomes a safe space for a lot of other marginalized groups, but doesn't, consider, uh, something invisible to a degree, like autism, and sometimes disabilities to begin with, by saying, oh, this event is going to take place at somewhere that requires going upstairs. And even though I can handle that, I was married for a long time to a paraplegic. And so I will even avoid going to those simply because it bothers me that they have not taken that into consideration and are alienating people with physical disabilities. And kind of out of respect for those people, I won't attend, because if you're excluding any of us, then it just doesn't feel like, ultimately, like a safe space to be in. And really, the only places um, that I'm comfortable in need to be places that are all encompassing, uh, inclusive or accommodating. And that usually just means a very small number of people in a quiet environment, meaning there's not overwhelming noise, music. This question made me think of a heart presentation we had in our community center not that long ago, where the heart team was coming out to do a mental health crisis presentation to kind of give community members, some ideas of, when they encounter these type of crises, things that they can do to support that person properly. And then it was going great. It wasn't that large of a group, maybe 2 dozen. It was going great until people said they couldn't hear, and so they turned to a microphone. And as soon as they got the microphone out, it was an assault. That's how I perceive noises as an assault. And so here I was in the middle of a mental health crisis presentation, and I'm having now a mental health crisis because I am, I've gone into fight or flight mode trying to escape this. And in the middle of this, a mother who should not have brought the child because that's not the type of event it was letting her 3-year-old run amok on the other half of the room, throwing a ball and it bouncing everywhere. And this was bothering other people as well. But for me, it just was debilitating. And I had to leave the room. And before I could even get on my bike to go home, I'm just sobbing in the hallway and having people come out and say, I'm so sorry this is happening. Is there anything we can do? And even having, one of the heart people talk to me, and it's like, no, because there's just no safe space for me. And nobody had the courage or something to go ask this mother to please stop. And so the entire environment was just a catastrophe for me, and just reminded me once again, hey, guess what? When you try to go do things, there's a 99% chance that it's all going to fall apart, that you're going to be impacted so negatively that it's not worth it. And again, I know I approach a lot of these things negatively, but that's what not having your support needs ever accommodated looks like.
It's an absolutely incredibly important perspective to come at this with, though. It's true. The negative stuff is the thing that needs to be addressed. It's not all everything's great in the world. It's never like that. And I really appreciate you feeling comfortable and confident enough to share that perspective with us.
Yeah, there's so many different experiences that people have that some people have, but the vast majority of other people don't have. And it doesn't even, it wouldn't even come up in the realm of possibility for them that something that's happening is causing someone else pain. There's in that situation, this is not a defense. This is alongside folks who experience is that sensory assault. It is. It's so hard to explain what that impact is, and for other people to even know it. And when that moment is happening, I know, like, for me, I am past the point of being able to communicate about it. So even people who are well-intentioned and are trying to support in the moment, they may even be trying to ask questions about what is bothering me or something, but it is so outside their realm of consideration that it wouldn't even be a question that they would ask. Oh, was it the microphone? Oh, was it the ball bouncing? Because for me, it's like, if with the ball example, I mean, like I get sometimes you have to bring your kids, and if I'm around, sometimes it's not the sound, it's the movement that takes so much of my energy when I'm trying to concentrate on what someone's trying to say. Yeah, so I just feel for what you're sharing, and yeah, I just really hear that. I think the subculture that I was going to speak to, I think I don't often find other autistic people who say this with me, so I'll share it as, I don't know, I don't, my example is sports, and I don't personally know a lot of other autistic people who would say that about sports. I think for being the way autism and ADHD live in me is I can be very sensory seeking in certain ways. There's certainly sensory things I'm avoidant about. But like I was saying before, like certain sounds that are really familiar, like the sound of a basketball game on the radio is very soothing to me. So we'll just make sure when we're hanging out, Heather, that we're not doing that together. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that I can be really sensory seeking. And so like sports to me, whether like I'm watching sort of that sound, I like that sound because it's all encompassing. So it drowns out individual sounds that are like repetitive. So being at a live sporting event, it's just like, for me, just like so much sound that I can't then distinguish, or I'm trying to hear something specific overriding, like I'm not trying to distinguish amongst sounds. But also like if I'm playing sports, the physicality of it. While I am not a hugger, I very much would enjoy like impact. So like playing basketball or playing football, or just like being able to have that kind of impact that is and like lifting weights, like those kinds of things are really regulating. Other things that really I love about sports is that conversation is like not required. And if you're watching or if you're playing, you really don't have to talk, or it's minimal, or it's very clear when those moments are, when it has gotten quiet, or at halftime, or, like it's just, and then there's things happening in front of you that you can comment on so that you don't have to try to generate something. So I really like that about it. And like the focus is on something else versus on me. And typically if you're watching sports, you're like next to each other versus facing one another. So just like eye contact, expectations and those kinds of things are different. And then again, like rules. So that's my subculture jam.
See, I might be with you on the sports thing, especially with like the activity of like doing the sport with people. And we're gonna transition over to our last question a little bit less seamlessly as some of the others. But Desi did start talking about like speaking with people online earlier. So The internet, and by extension, social media, has changed the landscape of social interactions for a lot of people. How does technology affect your social life?
Yeah, so for me, I am 23 years old and I was a homeschooled student throughout, starting with middle school. So I graduated the year before the pandemic started. So my first year of college, when I was supposed to, be getting into interning different things, that was not an option anymore. Lockdown was put in place. So there was no longer even, although my intention upon graduation was to become more integrated with in-person spaces, because like Heather has mentioned, I do really enjoy the company of other people, even though the unpredictableness of like the environment of a store or people's behavior is taxing on me. I would personally, my dream world would be to have, relationships that I've established with people and be able to have people who understand my needs and I understand theirs. And we are able to hang out in person, and get both sides of that done. But yeah, so without the internet, I probably wouldn't have any socialization at all. So for me, and then I'm Generation Z, so Gen Z, I think that that's also just kind of integral to the culture. It's just what the package is. I can't say how I imagined, like I was always on the internet with parental supervision. I can't imagine a world where that's not a thing for me. So yeah, technology is really integral to my social interaction and my, even my mental health and different things like that, because it's just without it, I would not be getting really any engagement with people at all.
So for me, social media is actually one of the things that's been very helpful. Not so much in engaging specifically with other people, but in being able to finally find a vast number of people around the country, around the world, whatever, who um, um, have similar experiences. And it's made me feel so much less alone and less of a freak because, I see them post these things and I'm like, I can relate to that. Oh my God, I can relate to that because these are not people that I am interacting with in real life. It's just such a huge weight lifted off me to know that uh, even though those people um, I'm not interacting with directly, that they see me, even though they don't know that they're seeing me, I am feeling seen by them sharing their experiences and feeling like, okay, it's not just me. Come on, it's not just you. It just happens to be just you in the place that you're in the time that you're in, whatever. And maybe that will change. That would be awesome. But um, for now, that is such, again, such a relief to be able to see these other people who think like I do, um, creators especially, who tick the boxes of who I am as a person, that they are autistic and then ADHD, anti-capitalist, things like that that make me feel like, oh, okay, this is good because I don't know where the hell these people are in Durham, and it's really hard to, like, there's no book saying, okay, where are the people that fit these criteria? Um, but they do exist and they're online and they're also seeking the same thing, which is connection with people like themselves, especially when they can't find it within their community.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to what everybody else said. Yeah, the like finding someone like me, yeah, like a 44-year-old queer, trans, autistic, disabled parent, who's left-handed. Like you're just like, what percent of the population is that? And how many others are there in Durham? So like as much as or as much as I really love knowing lots of people that are different than me, it also is really validating when you can even like see someone else. It's like, oh, okay, there's a way that we overlap in that way, and they're like me in that way. And I think that that is part of being human, is to do that. And I think, yeah, I don't know, I feel I feel so many positive things when I'm able to find those connections. And I think even if I do, there are people in Durham that I know who have a similar profile. But what social media has done is allow you to see that on a larger scale. So it's like, well, like we're everywhere. And I think that that actually really, that's been a strength of it, to really understand that we're not just a couple dots, and that it is part of the biodiversity of humanity. And I think that really reinforces that.
Since we still have some time, I will now open up questions from the audience. You can submit questions into the chat and I can read them out, or you can use the feature in Zoom to raise your hand and I will say your name so that you can voice your question to our panelists. I would like to remind you that the session is recorded. Yes, Anna.
Hey, I thank you all so much, first of all, for sharing your experience and your wisdom. I suppose my question is, I work with a lot of folks who maybe are undiagnosed or underdiagnosed. And so I think I'm always thinking through how to design some of those more like universally acceptable spaces for folks who may not know how to articulate those needs, some of those accommodation needs that you also beautifully mentioned. And so I guess my question is just like, how do you suggest for someone who may not know kind of how to articulate those needs, or even that they are needs? What's how would you suggest even like supporting them and better in defining that for themselves, and or creating environments that don't necessarily need someone to articulate those things? Does that make sense? I know it's kind of a cloudy question.
I would say for me that does make sense. Um, and hi, this is Desi here. Sorry, I never say that name. Um, but yeah, for me, I think when I was younger, So when I became aware of the fact that, like I may have been on a spectrum, it was like 2017. So I was about 16 years old. And the way I learned this was during a time when I was working with other people who happened to be autistic, that, it was not unheard of to not want to like verbally participate in the meeting, but still be attending and, use that accommodation to text, so something that has been transformative for me was communicating with other people and having open dialogues about not approaching these things as accommodations, but just preferences or needs. So just speaking about what I need to succeed in that space. And when I approached it from that angle, and then I think in curating a space, it's unfortunately impossible to make a space where everybody is going to be comfortable, because you have sensory seeking, sensory averse, sensory, we have such a wide spectrum of those things. But I think what all around helps is education surrounding these things, not just being seen as IEP accommodations, but just things that we need. In the same way that we need food and, water to survive. I think that taking it from that approach and applying, even if it's applying, words like, people will use when people say that they want, people, you hear parents say that they want quiet time when they're, which is kind of a cold word in some ways for overstimulation. It's saying like, we're going to have quiet time, or please sit, we're going to have this, or you can play with this, but I need you to be here. Or sometimes kids cannot abide to that. And so you have to then, use your headphones or walk away to your space and allow them to stem or do what they have to do. So it's about, I think, working in a collective community with each other and speaking to each other in the terms that we use, and not approaching this from an intellectual standpoint or academic standpoint, just feeling those feelings and allowing, like you said with your question, it's okay that it's abstract and it's okay that my answer is abstract, because at the end of the day, that's how people communicate and that's how we find the answer to things. So I hope that makes sense.
I know personally the thing that helps me the most prior to engaging in something, um, if it's something like going to a museum, generally you can go on there and you'll find an area where they're discussing accommodations, letting you know that they have a quiet space available, things like that. But when it's, just a different kind of event, it helps if I know more about it. And when people are advertising things and I see language, letting there may be flashing lights, which is great because now you're letting people who, might have seizures related to those lights know, um, in a way, you're not going to be happy here. And the same needs to happen with other things. There's going to be bright lights. The the noise level may be uncomfortable for some people because that applies to people with PTSD as well. So it's not even things being autistically specific, but just understanding that there's a decent sized number of people in the population who also struggle with sensory issues. And it doesn't even take like having to go through and go, okay, well, you know, let's figure out an entire detailed list of all the potential, things that could be upsetting for people, but just generally recognizing, there are people who need to know more information, like you know, how accessible is this going to be by bus? You know, because that can be, you know, exclusionary for people who don't have transportation. I mean, these are just things that I know help me in deciding whether or not it's something I want to participate in or can participate in. And one of the things that we're going to be doing at the co-op where I work is instituting a weekly sensory-friendly shopping hour, so that we can include those people from our community who have those challenges, not necessarily autistic people, but giving them that space, letting them know it exists for them.
We might have time for one more question if anybody has a question. Thank you, Anna, for that question. And thank you, Desi, Heather, and T for participating in this panel. I loved all of your input, and it's given me a lot to think about and a lot to like, keep my eye on in my community for anybody who's having certain difficulties that I haven't thought of during that time. And I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable, to speak about your experiences, to share with all of us. And to the attorneys, thank you for being here and participating in like listening to all of these perspectives. And I hope that this is giving you also an opportunity to reflect. And thanks again, everybody. We hope to see you for our next Autistic Perspective Series topic.